The AFL National Draft is officially done and dusted. Over 2 days, 71 players join an AFL club and will now embark on the biggest challenge of their lives, trying to survive and thrive in the competition. The big talking points are to do with night one, which was the first round of the draft. The near 2.5 hour long event was brutally long and at times painful to watch. Anyone else feel like those match bids took 10 minutes each to get through? It seemed like the big highlight was Leo Lombard, who was drafted to Gold Coast, who in pure excitement dropped an F-bomb on live TV. You know, it's a bit of a snooze fest when that is one of the big talking points out of the night. Overall, there were 27 picks in round one, and most of the first part of the draft went as predicted, with a few sliders and boulders scattered throughout. There were some takeaways from the top order of the draft. Powerful midfielder forward Sam Lawler was selected at pick 1 and he's at Richmond. He's in the mould of those powerful game-breaking mids, and although his under 18 numbers weren't great, partly due to injury, he's the classic type of player to be selected high in a draft. In fact, the first 9 picks were all midfielders. Toby Travalia, pick 8 to St Kilda, did play in defence this season, but he is touted to be a future on-baller at the AFL level. It took until pick 10 for athletic intercept defender Alex Taru to be snatched up by the Saints for the first key position type of player to go off the board. The night did prove 2024 was a midfielder and smalls field crop, with only 2 of the top 20 selected players being key positions. But in the middle and the back end of the first round is where some interesting trades went down. The first occurred with West Coast trading pick 15 to Port Adelaide, who in return gave them pick 16 and 45. From the outside looking in, this trade seems completely unnecessary. West Coast were never going to take Joe Berry at 15, so why did Port Adelaide need to jump ahead of them? Couldn't they have just stayed at pick 16 and saved their pick 45? It essentially gave West Coast an extra selection for nothing, as they always had their eyes on Western Australian on-baller Beau Allen. The only possible explanation is that Fremantle at pick 17 wanted to trade with the Eagles to get Berry, and to avoid doing business with their WA rivals, they told Port Adelaide to give them a pick to ensure they wouldn't do a deal with Fremantle and that Port would get their man. It may only be a small win for West Coast, but something is better than nothing. The other trade which will have big implications for next year was between Richmond and North Melbourne. With the last selection in the first round, the Tigers decided to move it out alongside their future second round pick for next year and get North Melbourne's first round pick in 2025. With that pick 27, North decided to draft utility key position player Matt Whitlock. Clearly in this situation, the big risk is on North Melbourne. If they have another bad campaign and finish bottom 2 or 3, it hands over a likely top 3 pick to Richmond for the price of pick 27 and a future second round pick. But this is far from guaranteed and not all bad for the Kangas. North Melbourne get an important key position player, something they desperately need, and still get a future second round pick. And if the Tigers are as bad as everyone thinks they will be, that pick should be in the early to mid 20s. And what if North Melbourne actually wins 8 or 9 games and that first round pick ends up between selection 10 to 15 with academy bidding and father-son factored in? The deal will not look nearly as bad. It's easy to pick on North Melbourne right now, who did offer that future first round pick to other clubs much earlier in the first round, but there is still a long way to go to see who the winner out of this deal is. Sticking with Richmond, the first phase of their rebuild is here. Overall, they took 8 players, the most out of all the clubs, with 7 of them coming within the first 28 picks. It's a nice balance of players. Sam Lawler and Josh Smiley come in as the midfielders, Taj Houghton at pick 12 is the X-Factor player, while the interesting decision was to take 3 big key forwards in Jonty Fall, Harry Armstrong and Tom Sims, who may be a future ruckman. Luke Traynor is the key defender out of the group, and their last pick at 58 was small forward Jasper Algar. With Prestia, Taranto and Hopper still in the midfield, it does make sense to get in a few key position players rather than load up with a bunch of on-ballers. It's an exciting time for Tigers fans whose next era begins right now. Brisbane also got their 2 draftees. Some had Levi Ashcroft as the number 1 player in the draft class, but due to clubs wanting to show how much they wanted their initial pick and perhaps wanting a favour from Brisbane in the future, Ashcroft's bid fell to pick 5 from Melbourne. Sam Marshall, who will join him as an academy player, also slipped a few extra spots to selection 25. It caused some more questioning over the bidding system, but the AFL has already announced it will change that in 2025 and beyond. Sure, the Lions got a bit lucky being a year early to avoid those changes, but there's nothing anyone can do about it right now. The Premiers are in good shape and have added even more midfield depth. Then there is the rest. Carlton got the Camporelli brothers in Ben and Lucas, who were later round picks. Tyler Welsh joined Adelaide as a father-son and will wear the same number as his father. And Jaron Carr, who was picked up by Fremantle at pick 63, is son of former Fremantle midfielder Matthew Carr. But one of the stories out of the night was River Stevens, the son of former North Melbourne captain Anthony Stevens, who's been given a chance at the Kangas, getting selected 67th overall. Sam Davidson, pick 51 to the Western Bulldogs, carried on the tradition of the winner of the Fothergill Round Mitchell Medal, which is the best young player in the VFL, getting drafted to the AFL. It's now 18 straight winners of the award that have made an AFL list in the national draft. The oldest player selected was Aidan Johnson from Werribee and the Lavington Panthers Football Club. He was picked 68 by Melbourne, and the 24-year-old mature age recruit might be able to lock down a forward role in 2025. Only time will tell who has fared the best out of all the 18 clubs. It's funny to see grades being given out on how each team is drafted. I'm not sure how you can really do that, because none of the 71 players have stepped foot on an AFL field just yet. But the easy part is over for the players picked up. Transitioning to the top level will be a huge jump for a majority of the draftees, and most of them will be starting pre-season very soon in a bid to line up in opening or round 1 for their new teams.